What is up, everybody? I'm Greasy. It's the end of the day. Let's get rolling. Welcome back to another day of ELA 1 with Mr. Williamson. That would be your favorite class of the day. Let's go ahead and get it jumping, shall we? We'll start out with our quote of the day. Our quote of the day comes from an author named C.S. Lewis. He said, "You are never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream." An important idea when thinking about characters like George, Lenny, and Candy. But how does the rest of the world feel when old people set new dreams and goals? Our daily objective. I can analyze Crooks's shifting attitude towards the other men and their dream farm. So today we're going to take a look at Crooks, kind of his tone towards the idea of George, Lenny, and Candy's dream farm. He's not quite as excited about their ideas they are. So by the end of this lesson, you need to be able to take a deep look at what his tone is towards that dream and kind of explain it in your own words.
Okay, everyone. So we are going to start off reading on page 71. We're going to pick up where we left off yesterday, still in this conversation with Lenny and Crooks. So remember that when you read along with me, you become a better reader. Not only that, but you are going to need to look back in the book to get some better ideas and quotes and things as such. Our focus for these pages. So how does Crooks treat Lenny while they're talking? So he's not quite as friendly as he was during our live classes yesterday. So how does Crooks treat Lenny while they're talking, and why does he treat him like this? So be thinking about those things as we read. Okay, everyone, so we're going to start a little above halfway on page 71, and his voice grew soft and persuasive. So this is the moment where Crooks's tone kind of starts to change towards Lenny. Take a look, and how's he treating Lenny in this section? His voice grew soft and persuasive. Suppose George don't come back no more. Suppose he took a powder and just ain't come back. What'll you do then? Lenny's attention came gradually to what had been said. What? He demanded. I said, suppose George went into town tonight and you never heard of him no more. Crooks pressed forward some kind of private victory. Just suppose that, he repeated. He won't do it, Lenny cried. George wouldn't do nothing like that. I've been with George a long time. He'll come back tonight, but the doubt was too much for him. Don't you think he will? Crooks's face was lighted with pleasure in his torture. Nobody can tell what a guy'll do, he observed calmly. Let's say he wants to come back and can't. Suppose he gets killed or hurt so he can't come back. Lenny struggled to understand. George won't do nothing like that, he repeated. George is careful. He won't get hurt. He ain't never been hurt because he's careful. Well, just suppose he don't come back. What'll you do then? Lenny's face wrinkled with apprehension. I don't know. Say, what you doing anyways? He cried. This ain't true. George ain't got hurt. Crooks bored in on him. Want me to tell you what'll happen? They'll take you to the booby hatch. They'll tie you up with a collar like a dog. Suddenly, Lenny's eyes centered and grew quiet and mad. He stood up and walked dangerously towards Crooks. Who hurt George? He demanded. Crooks saw the danger as it approached him. He edged back on his bunk to get out of the way. I was just supposing, he said. George ain't hurt. He's all right. He'll be back all right. Lenny stood over him. What you supposing for? Ain't nobody going to suppose no hurt to George. Okay, so let's take a look a little further. Stop there for a second and kind of zoom in. Each character, Crooks and Lenny, both show kind of fear towards something in the section. So let's check for our understanding in that area. So first question I want you to answer is, what does Crooks feel threatened by on pages 71 to 72? So we just saw it there right before we stopped. What does Crooks feel threatened by on pages 71 to 72? Answer that in 1 to 2 sentences now. So Crooks is physically threatened by Lenny, who is becoming increasingly angry when Crooks is making him think about what would happen if George were to not come back. So then that poses the second question. What does Lenny feel threatened by on page 71 to 72? So Lenny is threatened by Crooks's supposing and begins to fear that George won't return. So each of these men, it kind of highlights their biggest fears in life. Crooks might fear more abuse, whether verbally or physically, by other men, whereas Lenny, his biggest fear in the world is not having George to rely on, as that is a staple of the innocent character archetype, needing help from other people. So now we're going to pick back up on the last full paragraph of page 72. Crooks removed his glasses and wiped his eyes with his fingers. "Just sit down," he said. "George ain't hurt." Lenny growled back to his seat on the nail keg. "Ain't nobody gonna talk no hurt to George," he grumbled. Crooks said gently, "Maybe you can see now. You got George. You know he's going to come back. Suppose you didn't have nobody. Suppose you couldn't go into the bunkhouse and play rummy because you was black. How'd you like that? Suppose you had to sit out here and read books. Sure, you could play horseshoes till it got dark, but then you got to read books. Books ain't no good. A guy needs somebody to be near him." He whined. "A guy goes nuts if he ain't got nobody. Don't make no difference who the guy is as long as he's with you. I tell you," he cried, "I tell you, a guy gets so lonely and he gets sick." "George gonna come back," Lenny reassured himself in a frightened voice. "Maybe George come back already. Maybe I better go see." Crooks said, "I didn't mean to scare you. He'll come back. I was only talking about myself. A guy sets out alone out here all night, maybe reading books or thinking or stuff like that. Sometimes he gets to thinking and he's got nothing to tell him what's so and what ain't so. Maybe if he sees something, he don't know whether it's right or not. He can't turn to some other guy and ask him if he sees it too. He can't tell. He got nothing to measure by. I seen things out here. I wasn't drunk. I don't know if I was asleep. If some guy was with me, he could tell me I was asleep, and then it would be all right. But I just don't know." Crooks was looking across the room now, looking toward the window. Lenny said miserably, "George won't go away and leave me. I know George wouldn't do that." The stable buck went on dreamily. "I remember when I was a little kid on my old man's chicken ranch. I had 2 brothers. They was always near me, always there. Used to sleep right in the same room, right in the same bed, all 3. Had a strawberry patch, had an alfalfa patch. Used to turn the chickens out in the alfalfa on a sunny morning. My brothers sit on a fence rail and watch them. White chickens they was." Okay, everyone, so now we're going to read this little passage together to kind of analyze deeper into this interaction between Crooks and Lenny. This is called the bully-victim paradox. So if you're unfamiliar, a paradox is when two things that seemingly can't exist at the same time do. You might think of the rapper Biggie Smalls. That's a paradox. You can't be both big and small at the same time. So at the same time, in this concept, you can't be both a bully and a victim at the same time. However, that does happen. Let's read about how. Social psychologists have observed an interesting paradox or contradiction when studying bullying. People who are bullied are more likely to become bullies themselves. Psychologists believe this paradox can be traced to a couple of factors. In some cases, bullies enjoy the sense of control they get from exerting power over someone else. Because bullies are often lower on the social ladder or feel powerless in some other way in their lives, bullying can be a means of reclaiming power. In other cases, bullying happens when the bully projects or places his bad feelings onto the victim. In this way, bullies are often terrified of being victims and may bully to hide their very real sense that they themselves are a victim in some other way. So, one question, and then we'll lead into more about this bully-victim paradox. So Crooks teases Lenny a lot with this idea. He said, "What if George doesn't come back?" Just a quick check for understanding. Does Crooks actually believe that George isn't coming back from town? Give me more than a yes or no. What does he actually believe? So Crooks does not truly believe that George isn't coming back. He supposes this in order to get a rise at Lenny. So in other words, he's making Lenny think of this to kind of make him upset. He's doing it on purpose. He's making him upset on purpose. So now, looking at the bully-victim paradox, it says that bullies enjoy the sense of control they get from exerting power over someone else. Because this part's important, because bullies are often lower on the social ladder or feel powerless in some way in their lives, bullying can be a means of reclaiming power. So knowing that, let me ask you this question. Why does Crooks take pleasure in Lenny's torture when telling him George might not come home? So it says that Crooks takes pleasure in Lenny's torture. Why does he take pleasure in torturing Lenny in this moment? Answer in 2 to 3 sentences now. Okay, so Crooks might take pleasure in Lenny's torture because he is enjoying having power over someone else. As someone who is outcasted because of his race and is physically and mentally abused, he is normally powerless on the ranch. This is the one time he feels as if he has power over someone else because he's so much smarter than Lenny is.